आज तो बहुत ही exciting दिन है and this is the day I've been waiting for because there is no other person who fits better to talk about his second act or many acts that he's gone through. And he's a person who puts an act and also puts people in a spot to get the act out of them. So I'm so happy to welcome papacj today, whom I have been following for almost 20 years, if not...
She's a complete stalker, complete stalker.
Complete stalker. And I have been chasing him for the last how many months to say, hey, you better come on my podcast. So thank you and welcome.
No, it's my pleasure to be here, Archana.
So papacj, I cannot do justice to talk everything about you because there's so much that you can do justice while you tell everybody. I know that you are a stand-up comic, you are an executive coach, you are an author of this fantastic book right here, and of course you are the person who lifts people up, who puts energy into them, who makes them laugh and also leave a message, you know, which they can like think of and say, "Arey yaar, kya bol gaye?" You know, boss, इसमें तो बहुत deep meaning है. So please, I mean, you know.
I think आपने थोड़ा ज़्यादा ही बोल दिया.
नहीं.
And you know, it's very difficult for somebody to actually talk about themselves, in that what tends to happen is people put you in boxes, you know. In fact, when you say second act, at some point I'm going to debate that with you, because I think it is not about being an act.
Thank you.
At all. Right? It's about being authentic and being truly yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's when you realize that you don't have to follow a certain path or fit into a certain box. You are whole and complete as Archana, right?
Absolutely.
I can be whole and complete as CJ. I don't have to be a comedian or a coach you're not defined by the things that you do. I think you're defined by who you are as a person. And the problem, in some ways, you can call it first act, but not second act, because I find that, especially in our country, we are brought up in a way that we are chasing a definition of success that has been defined by other people, right?
Exactly.
Or by society. When we say...
I'm going to counter debate that, but I want to hear you.
When we say, oh, in our country we always say, oh, beta, settle ho jao, right? Or so-and-so is doing so well. Oh, you know, her son, her daughter, she's doing so well.
Yeah.
What does that mean, right? It means school karo, college karo, master's degree karo, get a decent job, shadi karo, do bache paida karo, then you are doing so well. And we are mentally on autopilot, because we are trained कि अच्छा इस job को join किया, उसके बाद promotion चाहिए, और पैसे चाहिए, और बड़ा गाड़ी चाहिए, और बड़ा घर चाहिए. At no point do you stop and say, okay, what am I doing this for? What is the point? Do I need to be on this treadmill all the time?
Yeah.
And is it bringing value and happiness to my life? But it's all this, oh look, he's doing so well, you know, so much success. But is that success? Because if you're not chasing a definition of success, of happiness that has been defined by you, you may be, so to say, successful in the way the world sees you, but you can still be deeply unhappy.
Absolutely. That's why more people are unhappy these days, you know.
And I think
despite having everything.
And I think that's where, and correct me if I'm wrong, the concept of the second act comes because at some point you get to a point where you may be very successful, so to say, by standards of the external world, and then suddenly you stop and you ask yourself, what am I doing this for? You know, I'm in this fancy office, corner office, you know, getting a lot of respect, but I'm not happy. And then I think the real journey is, in fact, it's the first line of my book. It says that stand-up comedy is an outward expression of an inward journey.
Oh yeah, so true.
So I think the journey is inward. And when you get comfort with who you are as a person and the things that you value, then that outward expression comes. And then it doesn't matter who thinks that you're successful or doesn't think that you're successful.
So true.
You find that sense of grounding and joy and contentment and happiness, which nobody can take away from you then.
So thank you for starting this, and I want to also tell you that what you said is absolutely right. So how I wanted to uncover the second act story is that second act is a metaphor. It is a metaphor when you are leading a standard, successful, given life by somebody else, there is so much disruption that you can bring to that life.
Yeah.
And when you do that, there is a higher meaning which comes out, there's a purpose which you start feeling, there's a happiness quotient which comes, you say, oh my goodness, I have so much in me, which when I disrupted myself, I experienced. And then comes your second act. So it's literally a metaphor of giving you like a bright spark in your day.
Yeah.
It just gives you something like that, okay, that, you know, I'm meant to do something else probably, and why was I leading this kind of a staple expected life, so to say.
You know, I want to throw in a caveat to that as well, is that, see, I don't believe that there is a right way, right?
Exactly.
There is only your way, and you can define what is right for you. Today, it's also, like you talk about the second act, it's very fashionable to say, oh, I'm a passionpreneur, you know, follow your heart and all of this stuff. But, you know, passion doesn't put food on the table. Right?
Of course.
You may want to feed your soul, but you need to feed your stomach as well. So, the things that we need to do to feed our stomach very often finance you to do the things you want to do to feed your soul. I mean, Shah Rukh Khan bhi shaadiyon mein nachta hai, right?
So yeah.
So hum kaun hai?
So he's disrupting his normal acting career and doing something else.
It's not
so then he's discovering maybe.
It's not so much disrupting, but what I'm saying is there's no shame in doing a 9 to 5 as well.
Yeah, absolutely
right?
not.
So,
but along that way, what I discovered was when you're doing a 9 to 5, you're very bracketed. You're doing stuff that is given to you. Maybe you don't try new things because you're, you know, you're spending a certain amount of time at work, certain amount of time at home. And then there is so much that still remains unrevealed from inside of what all that one can do. And I think mostly entrepreneurs, because they are thrown into so many different failures, I would say, that's when they start discovering, oh my goodness, I can handle this also, and I have resilience also, and I have creativity also, and I can make my social media page also today, to running a full setup also, handling people also, management also. So I'm just saying sometimes when we are working in a 9 to 5, we are not also thrown into different areas and we don't experience that. So second act, I just wanted to bring that along the way that we are doing, try something else, try something new. Come out of your barrier, don't fear, like public speaking. Some people can't even make a presentation. So why don't we start doing small things? Take part in Toastmasters maybe. I'm just saying, there's so many things one can do along, but we don't.
Let me add to that on a couple of fronts. One is that I believe that the second act is a mindset change.
True, absolutely.
You can totally do that within the frame of a 9 to 5 job or whatever else you're doing. A lot of it is about meaning. Do you get meaning from what you're doing? There's a wonderful book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about being, living through actually, a concentration camp at Auschwitz. And he talks about how even in that situation, when you can assign meaning to what you're doing. So it's a conversation I sometimes have, you know, when I'm coaching in organizations. And it's something I think people should do with people they work with. So you normally ask somebody, यार तुम्हारे सपने क्या है? Sir, मुझे ना ये target meet करना है. I said, no, forget about that. तुम्हारे सपने क्या है?
तुम्हारे सपने क्या है?
Sir, मुझे अपनी माँ के लिए घर खरीदना है. Okay, so what do you need to do in order to buy your mom a house? मेरे पास इतने पैसे होते ना, तो I would be able to do. What do you need to do to get to that amount of money? Sir, if I can meet this goal, what is coming in the way? Sir, ये problem है. Okay, how can I help? Such a simple conversation. But then, that person who's working is no longer working because his boss has told him to hit a target. He's working because मुझे अपनी माँ के लिए घर खरीदना है. Now imagine that mindset shift. He's doing the same 9 to 5, but now there is meaning to his work.
So true.
So I think that mindset shift is really important.
So true.
And there was another idea that came to my head, but I forgot. Oh yeah, of course. So there's another wonderful book. I'm trying to remember her name, and the name of the book also. I think it's Julia Cameron. It's a book called The Artist's Way.
Okay.
Off the top of my name, I'm not remembering the name of the author. I think it's Julia Cameron. She talks about two wonderful things. One thing she says is that she calls it daily pages or morning pages. You know, just like you go to the washroom when you wake up in the morning to get the crap out of your system, right? You need to do the same thing for your brain. because very often there's just noise there.
Of course.
So she says every morning when you wake up, first thing, for 20 minutes, it does not matter what you write, with a pen and paper, 20 minutes just write. Stream of consciousness. You can start by saying, I don't know what to write or whatever, but you need to fill up 3 pages. That gets some of that noise out of your brain. So ab khali ho gaya. Then she talks about another wonderful thing which is called the artist's date. She says once a week for 2 hours on your own with nobody else, do something different that you haven't normally done before.
Yeah.
Whether
So
it is
wonderful.
cooking, whether it is trying a musical instrument, whether it's going to a history museum, whether it's going for a jog, whether it's going to the zoo, whatever it might be. Because it's a different input for your brain, right, which stimulates you differently, triggers different neurons and allows you to make different connections.
Right.
So that's another wonderful way just to get the mind thinking differently to my normal, I wake up, I do this, I do this, I do this. You know, the whole week is gone and you're thinking, what did I do the whole week? And you're like, kuch nahi yaar. You know, naya kuch nahi hai. So you don't feel stimulated.
So I
those are
think
just
we are
some
very
thoughts that-
aligned on this.
Yeah.
We are very aligned on this, and this is exactly second act. So the debate is over, and now the podcast questions will come.
Oh my God, it's planned hard.
Because people are waiting to know about you here, and you know, of course. So why don't we start with this question? Though I normally ask it in the end.
Ji.
So because you started with second act, so now tell me the way you define it. What's your second act?
I don't really define a second act. You know, I don't think there's a second act. I think there are multiple acts.
Yes.
But the journey is inward, right? Even, you see, the challenge happens is we are, again, the mindset we are brought up with, or the conditioning, I think, is that this thing about settled, right? You need to be settled. I find I am constantly unsettled, right? I am constantly
Great.
an unfinished piece of work.
Wow.
I am not a comedian, I am not a coach, I am many things, and I still don't know sometimes what I want to do, what I enjoy, but I keep trying different things. And then you can get into it. You know, it's like sometimes they say with a relationship, right? They say some people come into your life for a reason, some for a season, and some for a lifetime. It's the same with professions, right? I might do stand-up comedy for some time. I may do it for my lifetime. In the meanwhile, the coaching will come. Then randomly I've written a book. This was not part of the plan. In fact, if you look back, if all of us look back on our lives, and you look at 90% of the major changes or things that have happened in your life, they were all unplanned. All unplanned. It just happened by chance. Yet we spend so much time planning. So what I would say is what's important is to have an open mind, have conversations, meet new people, talk to different, you know, try different things, have interesting conversations. You never know what leads to what. But we have a mindset of, अच्छा यार, why am I going there? उसको वहाँ कुछ मतलब है, कुछ काम होगा तो मैं जाता हूँ. But if you have that open mind, I mean, today you and I are talking. You might connect me to somebody else. That person might connect me to somebody else. It might lead to something, you know. Who knows? But the thing is, you've got to be light on your feet, and more importantly, light in your mind. You've got to be nimble and open to new things. I mean, look at technology now. Everything is changing. You know, I mean, 1 month ago, ChatGPT was going to change the world. Now they're saying, oh, ChatGPT, to yaar, that's old stuff. Now we've got Auto GPT. So who knows how things change? You know, in 2 years' time, with artificial intelligence, our jobs could be, you know, obsolete. What are you going to do then?
Your job wouldn't be, because what you do on stage, nothing can change. I mean, AI cannot take over that. So that is not possible, but and this podcasting also, I don't think the AI equipments can do it to say, okay, hello, can you please tell me how are you feeling?
To come up with questions, right? But fortunately for now,
the human feelings still can't be taken away.
Exactly,
right?
humanity,
the
emotion,
warmth,
feeling.
the warmth can't be taken away. Great. So looking at your work, I've been very intrigued to ask you all the time, and because I also coach a lot, and I know that there are days when you don't feel up to it yourself. And then you have to go and do something on the stage or in front of people. And it's even harder for you because you have to get the humor out of somebody else. So how do you manage to just switch in, or what do you do when you're not feeling up to it?
I think that's just when you're aligned from a values and a purpose point of view, right? And you realize that, I think this thought process is also a very egocentric thought process. It's me, mera mood nahi hai. I'm not feeling up to it. I'm having a bad day. You wouldn't ask this question to a surgeon, right? That today I'm doing a heart operation, but I'm in a bad mood, so you know what, I'm not going to stitch this guy up. You can't do that, So I think I've done shows when I've been terribly unwell. I'm not saying you should work when you're unwell. I think that's not the message I want to get across. But I've done shows when I've had a bad day or whatever the case might be. But there's 500 people who've turned up and invested their time and money and effort to be there so that you can bring some laughter into their lives.
Right.
I think it's very egocentric to say that I've had a bad day, so I'm not going to give them my best. It's not. They don't deserve that. What have they done to ruin your day? So I think that's just what being a professional is as well. You've got to suck it up and deliver.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask you is that how observant are you in every situation, and how have you become so observant? Because you also have to give the right analogy, some relatability to what your audience at that time can also, relate to when you're speaking or presenting something. How do you do that all the time?
Couple of things happen. One is from the point of view of, in my regular life, I'm not always that observant.
Okay.
Right? When I'm on stage, it's like Clark Kent has become Superman. Right? Like normally my memory is also not very good, but when I'm on stage, I can't explain it, Archana. It's like you become superhuman.
Wow.
My senses are so sharp. There are multiple brains that are working at the same time. Right? There's one brain that is delivering the joke.
Wow.
There is another brain
which is also observing.
That is thinking, okay, hang on, this is how they're reacting to this. So after this, I'm going to do that. There is another brain that is observing what is going on in the room. I could be talking to you here. Somebody will whisper something in that corner or drop something. I'll finish this conversation, tell the joke, and then I'll come back to them and say, bro, why were you doing that? And these guys are like, how the hell is he doing that? Then over the course of the show, I talk to multiple people. When I do that, I always ask them their names. And the people I pick on or interact with, at the end of the show, it may be a 90-minute show, I will end by saying there are a few people who deserve rounds of applause. Can we have a round of applause for Ravi sitting over there, for Archana, for so-and-so person who's here from so-and-so city. And that's the part that just blows people's brains away. That, my God, how did this guy do it?
Yeah.
Once the show is done, by the next day I've forgotten everything. I might even forget where I did the show the previous day. So I don't really know how that works, but it really switches on. The other thing that I do from an observation point of view is I also do homework. So if I'm doing a show in Singapore,
right,
I will tell the organizer of the show to keep the last 10 days worth of newspapers. I will read up their news. I will find out about their history, their politics, their recent scandals.
Wow.
I will talk to the locals. I will talk to a taxi driver, find out their opinion on it. That gives me my base to work on.
Right.
So when I start the show, my first 10 minutes are purely about them. I've done shows in colleges where I've done 40 minutes of stuff purely about the college, and they're like, is he a student? Is he an alumnus? How does he know so much? And that's what instantly gives that connect. But also I think what you want to really tap into is what are the things that people care about.
I think
when you can tap into what they care about, you've got them.
Right.
The mistake people make is they go in thinking, oh, this is about me. I see this with, so sometimes I coach startups on pitches. I help them with their pitch to an investor. I did this with somebody recently, and they say, oh, we're pitching to this VC firm. I said, don't tell me VC firm. Who is going to be in the room? Oh, here are the 4 people who are going to be in the room. I said, I want you to create a dossier for me, like the FBI or the CBI or the CIA does on each of those people. So we got that, and based on that, I was able to connect what we are doing and pitching to every single person. Your interest was this, you volunteered in this 15 years ago, you're still volunteering it for now. Our business helps you do exactly that and provide that, because we know this is something you care about. You were on Twitter 3 months ago and you said, these are the 5 criteria that are important for me when I'm looking at a startup. Today I want to show you that our organization meets exactly those 5 criteria that you think is important. Suddenly these guys are like,
Yeah.
But the other thing is, for example, I run a course or a workshop which is called A Comedian's Guide to Communication Strategy. Very simple what I do in that. First, here is this wonderful story from the world of stand-up comedy. Ha ha ha, we've really enjoyed it, we've been entertained, great time. Then I remove the learning from the context. I say, okay, why did I tell you this story? Right? This is the learning. Then I say, okay, now how does this apply in your context? Oh, this is how I can use it.
Right.
So, for example, can I give you an example?
Yes.
Sorry,
yes.
I'm blabbering away. Tell me
No,
to stop.
no.
My
I'm
answers
just going to recap everything. So I'm also very
My problem is sometimes I forget the question. One thought leads to another, and then I just
doesn't matter. Just
ramble
go
off.
on.
So, for example, one thing I say is that one of the best pieces of advice I got is that it's very important for you to grow in the dark. When you hit the limelight, you don't have the freedom to screw up.
Oh wow.
Right?
So important.
For example, if I'm performing at the Sydney Opera House, right, I can't afford to have a bad show.
Yeah.
Right? And I have performed at the Sydney Opera House. Now, when you want to succeed all the time, what do? You play safe. Yeah, I know this works, let me stick with this. As a result, you don't experiment, you don't innovate, you don't take risks, you stagnate.
Yes.
So as comedians, what do? We go to small open mic nights. That's our solution to this problem. 30 people in the room, try new things, see what works, see what doesn't work. The stuff that doesn't work, try it differently until it works well, then you take it to the larger show. My question to you as an organization, where is your open mic night? Where are you going to experiment? What are the risks you would like to take? Which products, which markets, which customers, which price points?
Wow.
And then in a workshop, I would send them away for 25 minutes. Please talk about this.
Wow.
So that at the end of half an hour, they literally have a plan in place saying, you know what, these are the things we want to try. This is when and where we're going to try them. See what works, bring it in. Same applies for human beings, yeah. You're not going to be fantastic at something the first time you try it, but everybody started as an amateur, right?
Yes.
So you've got to get out there and try, experiment, make those mistakes. The mistake people make now is they want to get famous before they get good.
That's true.
Right? We live in a world of external validation. Your sense of self-worth is being dictated by somebody else. How many likes, how many shares, how many, And we complain about our parents' generations. Oh, you're so worried about what society thinks. Log kya kahenge, right? What do you think social media is? It's our generation's version of log kya kahenge. You know what happens in my industry, for example, in comedy. When you start as a new comic, you need to do 5 minutes, right? Now people go and they get a really good 5-minute act. They tighten it, they sharpen it, they do the same 5-minute every day. It's fantastic. They shoot it, they stick it on the internet, they get 2 million views. Now you're famous. Here's this guy who's really good. You can fill up a 500-seater theater. 500 people come in, you get on stage, but you only have 5 good minutes. 5 minutes on the internet is not going to teach you how to hold a live audience for 90 minutes.
So true.
So the problem is that people are trying to learn the tricks of the trade before they learn the trade, right? So the grow in the dark is not happening. You're in the limelight, and people are, I saw that guy, 2 million views, kya show tha yaar, uska show jaake dekhte hain. Then suddenly they go there and they find out this 1 hour is quite average, So sorry, I've just rambled on, but
no, I want to recap for everybody.
Recap.
So I'm hearing very, very intently, but at the same time, I hope I haven't missed out, and please barge in if I have. So for the sake of everyone, I want to say that whenever there is something in front, first, please go to the background of it. Understand that there is.
That sounds so wrong, yeah. It sounds so dirty. I'm joking. That's just the comedian in me.
Okay. I want to tell you that please do your homework before you get there, in simple words.
This is like these shops that you see, entry from backside only.
Yeah.
Please
do your homework. The second thing what I understand is that, before you get anywhere, to understand the culture, the nuances, who's in the room, whom are you actually targeting and what do they need from you? Rather than just saying that I am here with a solution, first find out what they need from you and can I help you with that? Is that fine? Did I recap it right?
Yes, but I'm going to chuck in another.
Okay.
See, there are no rules to anything. Right? There are no. You got to figure out what works for you. I can tell you this that, I mean, I'm giving all this gyan and saying all these supposedly sensible words, but whenever an opportunity has come, if I would actually think about it, of something that I'm interested in doing, that I'm not qualified to do, or not skilled enough. On one side, people would say, oh, you need to upskill and get to there because you won't get a second chance. But in my case, almost always, if I were to think, I'm thinking, I don't know if when this opportunity will come again. So what I do is, I say, yes, I've done it 100 times, I know how to do it.
Oh.
And I say yes.
And
then between the time of saying yes and when I need to do it, I figure out how to do it. I learn.
Wow.
Right? And the first thing I do when I want to learn is I call up 3 people who have been doing it for 20 years and are really good at it and say, I need to learn. Please tell me, what is your advice? What is your guidance? How would you approach this? What do I need to read? What do I need to study? And then I get myself to a level where I can do it. And in most of the cases, I have been able to pull it off.
Wow.
And even what's important to remember is even when you're executing it, you need to be light on your feet because you may go in with a plan and things may change completely on the spot. You need to be able to adapt.
Yes.
You also need to be able to be humble. I remember I was running a workshop, an international workshop with a very senior team. We had 3 days planned, and on the second day afternoon, the workshop just went to crap. Right? So I had something planned for the second afternoon. On the second morning, we did something which made the second afternoon session I had planned, I wouldn't say not as relevant, but I asked the people participating, what do you suggest we do? Should we do this, which I had planned for you, or should we do this? And they said, no, we would rather do this. Okay. So we started doing that. Within 40 minutes, I had 14 people from 12 different countries just fighting with each other, saying, you know what, when we did this work, I delivered the work, but you went and presented it to my boss. I got no credit. Oh, you did this. And in my head, I was sitting there saying, oh my God, you're right. So then I let them sort of
fight it out.
Yeah, sort of get it off their chest and give them a little break. So, go, let's reconvene in half an hour. Then one of the guys who was in that workshop I knew quite well. I'm like, bro, what do we do? And so you've got to be light enough to learn. He says, you know what, I think you should do this and you should do that. So I said, yeah, sure, thanks a lot. Let's do that. So we did that. And then later I was like, I actually, let it go to, become like that because I wanted you guys to get it over. All this stuff I gave. But at the end of that day, one of the senior most people in that workshop spontaneously got up and he says, I normally don't like consultants or, people who do your kind of job. He says, but for me today, you are the gold standard of any coach that I would ever bring in because of your adaptability, your flexibility, and the emotional intelligence that you showed in working with us today. Right? And I would normally not blow my own trumpet, but this was very difficult for me to do. But the reason I was able to get to that end was because I was humble enough to realize that there are other people in this room who know how to do this better than I do. And I need to draw on their strengths to be able to adapt and
that's
deliver
a very
what is
beautiful
required.
learning. Yes, that's really wonderful. And I think what I also want to recap about learning in the dark, and I will really cling on to that, and I'll hold on because I'm a newly turned entrepreneur, 2 years, and I also want to get there fast. But I've also learned now that it's like that the bamboo story, the Chinese bamboo story.
Yes. Please tell them the story for those who haven't heard.
So it's a story about there is a bamboo seed sowed, but you cannot see anything for 5 years. Every day you need to water it, you need to nourish it, and you can't see a thing. And once it starts, it bursts out, I think within days it shoots up, right? but the 5-year process has to be followed. And I now keep telling myself, I have to go through the grind of 5 years, whether it is 5 or 3 or whatever, but everybody has to go through that process, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, so when it comes to passion and following your heart, right, I believe that you love what you do, you get good at it, and then the money comes.
Right.
The gap between the loving it and the money coming is indefinite. It's different for different people. You don't know when it comes. That middle bit is where a lot of people falter and like, let me just go back to doing that.
So tell me from your life, of course.
Sorry, may I just interrupt for a second? Because there's one more thing. There's a question. So sometimes when I have a coffee with people, I ask them 2 questions. Let me ask you these 2 questions.
Oh, I'm like feeling I'm in the spot.
We'll do this.
Okay.
We'll do this live.
Okay.
If you had $1 billion in the bank to your name, not what would you buy, how would you spend your time? Question.
I would spend my time, because I've just come back from a course.
Okay.
And that course also really opened my mind, and it was called the Millionaire Mindset Program.
Okay.
And it was with this fantastic coach called Thaddeus Lawrence from Singapore.
Yeah.
And I think what I understood was that...
Forget about the course.
So this is what I'm going to do.
What are you going to do?
That's what I've learned from there. That, that how a passive stream of things has to be created before you get anywhere. So I want to learn millions of things, literally, to whether it's money or no money. I want to invest in the best coaches. I want to invest in my best learning, and I want to invest in my best unlearning more than anything.
So now give me the simpler answer to that question. You have $1 billion in the bank. How are you going to spend your time?
I want to spend my time learning and unlearning.
Learning and unlearning.
Yeah.
Okay. Done. That's question 1. So when I ask a 22-year-old, their normal answer to this question is, I'll travel.
Achha.
I say, kahan jaoge tum? I'll go to Europe. How long will you go for? I'll go for 1 month. Now there used to be a book called Frommer's Guide to Europe on $50 a day. Right? So you can do 1 month in Europe for say $1.5 2 lakhs, whatever the number is. What I'm trying to get you to, and like you said, learning and unlearning, is that the cost of your dreams is far lower than whatever imaginary figure you might have in mind. The fact is, most people have not calculated what is the cost of my perfect life. Most people have not done it. Question number 2, how much money do you need from today until the day you die? Right? So that's the question I ask people. Then I say, okay, let's assume you need.
मेरे को 100 crore चाहिए.
Do you need? No, calculate it.
Calculate
Count
it.
for everything.
At 40.
Count for your
Illness.
count for illness, holidays, children, education, shadi. Actually do an actual number. Most people haven't done that. From that number, subtract the value of what you've already got. You're left with the balance. Divided by the number of years you think you're going to work. You got an average number. A lot of people who do this calculation figure out that they're working far harder and far longer
Which is true.
than they need to do to meet every single expense they will ever have. Which brings me back to question 1. Why are you not living the life of your dreams? Right? So that's the problem. We keep doing this. We're on this treadmill. मैं 50 तक काम करूँगा ना और 60 तक, then I'll retire, then I will live my perfect life.
Yeah, correct.
But by then you may not have the energy or the health or whatever else
So
to do
true.
it. If you look at the Harvard happiness study, which has been run over 80 years now, it says that the greatest source of happiness across income groups, whatever socio-economic backgrounds, is the quality of relationships. There was that nurse called Bronnie Ware in Australia who worked with terminally ill patients, and she asked them what their top 5 regrets were. Number, I don't know what the order is. I did not live a life that was true to myself. I was too busy trying to please other people or chasing a definition.
Right.
I lost touch with my friends. I worked too hard. These are their greatest regrets. So I think it's very important for us to stop and think.
Yeah.
Kitna chahiye tumhe? When will you be happy? Can you answer that one question? When will you be happy?
Yeah.
If you can answer that, that sets you up. Because sometimes you realize I've already got everything. Why am I running? If you look at all of history, how many people do you remember? Everyone will be forgotten in 100 years. कौन सा तीर मार लोगे तुम?
When you're facing the audience, of course, every time it wouldn't go right, that you were just speaking about as well. Yeah, what? But then, how do you really face up to that? Because most people will feel awful and think, I'm not good enough and I don't think I'll do it the next time.
No,
How
so
do
for
you do
starters,
that?
if you don't have a very thick skin, you can't succeed as a stand-up comedian. The first 100 times you do it, you'll probably be crap. You're supposed to be. Nobody gets that good that quick. In fact, sometimes when you're performing, alarms go off in the background. And
Also, yes.
see, what happens with us is, even as I've been doing this 18 years now, even today when I try something new, I don't know whether it's going to work until I do it in front of a live audience. If I write 10 jokes, maybe 6 of them will work, right? If a new guy does it, maybe 1 will work. But you have to, so there's 2 things. When you start out and you're performing in front of an audience and it's going terribly, then, there's nothing worse than trying to make people laugh and getting 5 minutes of silence. Right? You have to ask yourself on the way home, if I'm ever again in the same country in front of a similar audience with a similar background, what can I do differently so I don't look like a fool? So actually for us, failure is the only way to improve. Today I've done maybe 3,000 shows, in almost 30 countries with black audiences, white audiences, Indian audiences, mixed audiences, 16-year-olds, 80 years old, a very mixed group, and I've learnt and gotten better because I have failed and then thought, Arey, next time I'm doing this, how can I make sure I do it better? So that's the only way to improve when you're starting. When you're an experienced act, there's one of 2 things I'll do. Either if it doesn't go well, a joke doesn't go well, I will say something like, that was a bit crap, wasn't it? Don't worry, I'm a professional. I've got this. I'll bring it back.
Oh, that's
right?
cool.
Or sometimes I'll just be cocky and I'll say, you know what, I've done this 3,000 times in 30 countries. If you're not laughing, you have failed. I know what I'm doing.
That's a good one.
I am getting paid to do this. You are paying to be here. If you're not laughing, whose loss it is? Yours. So, see, there are multiple ways to do it. But all I'm saying is failure is all part of life here. The important thing with failure is you have to learn from it. If you're not learning from it, then it's a failure.
Right.
There's that saying that either you win or you learn. You've got to learn.
And then you win.
And then you win.
So you're one person who has intentionally or unintentionally created such a beautiful personal brand. And I don't know how it came to you when you started your journey. papacj was like a prefix to CJ, right?
Yeah.
And I was reading about it, hearing about it, why
Yeah.
Papa. And of course, people who want to know more about why papacj, please go back to his videos and a lot of things that he's spoken about. Read the book. So, personal branding today is something that I understand and it's been spoken about. But 20 years hence, did it happen because just by chance, did you know about it? Did you name it personal branding? What was the history behind it?
See, I think for me, it's probably more unintentional. If I could give you just one tip about personal branding, I think what's really important is for you to be authentic.
Yeah.
Because, have you ever conducted a job interview? Have you?
Yes.
If somebody is bullshitting you, can you tell?
Of course.
Exactly the same. If you're bullshitting somebody else, they can tell instantly. If you're trying to tell them things you think they want to hear or showcase something that you're not, they're going to see through it. You can only be a second best Indra Nooyi, right? You can be the best Archana Datta there is. So I think it's about being authentic and being comfortable in your own skin. This happens to us as comedians as well, right? When we start, we want the confidence that we can make people laugh. So we'll go for the easy joke. So the kind of joke I will do is that, I live in Delhi, and as somebody who lives in Delhi, sometimes we struggle to understand the language people speak in Mumbai. Like we call it bread, they call it pav. We call it pyaz, they call it kanda. We call it a servant quarter, they call it a 2 BHK. Right? So now I know that's a guaranteed laugh. Right? Then we do observational comedy. So just like the rest of the world sees things around them, as comedians so do we, but we look at it slightly differently. So standard observations, for example, I was taking driving lessons in London, and this instructor asked me, he says, oh, you Indians, why don't you drive in a straight line? I said, I'm not used to it. I'm from Calcutta. Right? In England, you drive on the left of the road. In Calcutta, we drive on what is left of the road.
True.
So that happens. Then what happens is that because we have a microphone, we have so many people coming there and listening to us, our egos get big, right? We get cocky. We will start using bad language, pick on positions of authority. We will do the kinds of jokes that, firstly, picking on positions of authority, that's not an ego thing. It's just, it can be very powerful. Like they say, humor is like a rubber sword. You can make a point without drawing any blood.
So true. I'll come back to that.
Yeah, but let me come back to this bit, right? But you do the kind of jokes that make you feel cool or intelligent. So, for example, I was doing a show. I'll tell you a joke I do. That I went to the US under the Trump administration. I had a beard. This officer looks at my passport, looks at my beard. He says, you know what, you Indians, you're a mistake.
Oh shit.
In fact, India is a mistake. I said, come on, officer, as an American, you should be grateful to us. He said, why? I said, well, because when Christopher Columbus discovered America, he was looking for India. So, to be perfectly honest, you are the fucking mistake. Right? Now, with that joke, you crack a joke, it's the kind of joke that gets more applause than laughter. You get laughter also, but you get applause. But there's a pause, and then people are like, and then they get it. They're like, oh yeah, Christopher Columbus was looking for India when he found America, you know. But eventually what happens is, you figure out that you're in a profession where there are no rules, no boundaries, no guidelines, no social norms. So you're forced to look inwards. What are the things that I value? What are the things that I want to talk about? What do I think is funny? And then you no longer care about the audience. You're like, this is my truth. If it works for you, fine. If it doesn't work for you, also fine. And your audience will find you. Today, a famous comedian, Russell Peters, Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, they're not going to change what they do depending on who is in the room. I mean, Chris Rock might have Will Smith is in the room, but so, and then you become this authentic person. I mean, today you can, if you're trying to project your brand as saying, you know, I'm this teetotaler, living a very simple life. I wake up at 4 a.m., I meditate, I exercise, I go to sleep at 9. And then on Facebook and Instagram, you've got photographs of you doing tequila shots in a nightclub. That's not going to fly, right? So you've got to be authentic. And the beauty of that, I mean, today stand-up comedy is the biggest blessing I've had in my life, is that authenticity translates into the rest of your life as well, you know. And people realize, I mean, I live in Delhi. This is a city where people are not necessarily their most authentic selves. You know, there's this pretense.
Delhi wale?
No, because the first, see, I'm an outsider. I came from Calcutta.
Oh, okay.
My first experience was a lot of people are either into business or politics. So they're either kissing somebody's ass or they're kicking somebody's ass. Right? So when they meet you, they try and figure out where you are on that spectrum. Right?
Cool.
But when you become an authentic person, even the people around you realize that they don't have to put on that pretense in front of you. So they feel comfortable being their authentic selves. And you are able to have quality relationships which are authentic because people realize they don't have to play that game with you. Oh, by the way,
Coming back to personal branding.
Sorry, we'll come back to personal branding. There's one more thing I want to say because it's another thought that came to me while we were speaking, and my memory, like I said, is terrible. I'll forget it. It's about public speaking, right? It's about how an audience reacts. I want to clear up a misconception. The test of how good your show or performance or speech or presentation is not the amount of laughter or applause, but when you pause, how much silence there is. Then you know.
Excellent. I've just done a reel on that.
Then you know you've got people hanging on to every word, because different audiences enjoy things differently. I remember I was once doing a show in front of a college audience, clapping, cheering, banging on chairs. Next day I'm doing this, high society type show, and I think it's going terrible. And then a whole bunch of people come to me afterwards and tell me how much they really enjoyed that, Wow. So then you realize that people enjoy things differently. And the other thing to keep in mind is that if I'm performing in front of 1,000 people and 200 people laugh, I've got laughter. 50 people clap, I've got applause. Silence requires all 1,000 of them to participate.
Wow, right? That's powerful.
So that's something to keep in mind, and it applies to so many aspects of your life. You know, when you think about social media, there's a lot of people who comment, who like, but when you're silent, when you don't post for 4 or 5 days, who actually picks up the phone to call you to say, boss, are you okay?
Yeah.
I haven't seen you post anything for 3 or 4 days. So be aware of that power of silence.
Wow.
I've seen people in job interviews, the interviewer will ask you a question, you will answer the question, there is silence from the side of the interviewer, and you're uncomfortable with silence, you feel the need to fill that silence. So you will keep rambling and rambling and rambling and actually talk yourself out of the job that 2 minutes ago you had landed because you gave a proper, concise answer. So yeah, sorry, that's just a thought that came to my mind, so I wanted to.
No, I wanted to recap, but then I said, no, it's better.
Don't recap everything. They
No.
have the intelligence. I'm hoping you have the intelligence to make what you want of it.
Okay, great. So, now coming back to personal branding question.
Yeah,
You said some things were built unintentionally.
yeah.
But today it is about personal branding. It is about putting yourself out there. It is about showing your authentic self. Also your vulnerability, your failure, whatever you are as a person. But it takes a lot.
Yeah.
So what do you want to tell people who
Okay, so-
should do or who are in the process of building their personal brands?
So there are a couple of aspects to it, right? Now, the first part is, I teach personal branding as well. The first part of
What is the name of that course? Because you have quirky names of all your courses.
The first part is, what is your personal brand, right? Now for that you've got to figure out who you are, what your strengths are, what your motivations are, what your weaknesses are, what your values are, what your purpose is. That's the harder part, right? Is actually figuring out what that authentic brand is, and that requires a lot of introspection. Post that, there are 2 or 3 things you need to do. One is your personal brand needs exposure, so people need to hear about it, whether it's social media, whether it's public speaking, whether it's. The second is unity. So
Unity.
what unity means when it comes to personal branding is you can't say you're one thing and be somebody else, exactly as we just spoke about,
Okay.
right? So your brand needs to hold true, otherwise people lose trust in that brand.
Right.
And the third thing is commitment. You've got to be able to commit to maintaining that brand over a long period of time. Again, if it is a brand that you can live, if you're authentic, it requires no work because you're just being who you are, So I think a lot of branding, the first step is actually, even in comedy, the progression that I spoke to you about, they say that it takes you 10 years to find your voice in comedy. And what is your voice? Your voice is just being your authentic self. It's until you realize that, you know what, I don't need to pretend to be somebody else. I don't need to put on a show. I can just be me, and that's okay. And that's when the magic starts. That is your personal brand, right? And you don't have to do any branding about it because you are just being you, and giving people a chance to see who that.
So are you also teaching now how to be a stand-up comic? Because there are so many kids who are coming up, but I think they've already lost the way before they found it. I mean, of course, no hard feelings here, but to be honest, there's so much trash here that one doesn't know. And sex is used so loosely, and what is the new definition of?
So couple of things, firstly, so when I came back to India, I started off the English language comedy scene in Delhi, before the Comedy Store, before anything was going on. And that time I was a lot more actively involved in kind of grooming the circuit and creating safe spaces for people to perform. Then it picks up on its own and I wasn't required to be there. So I don't really do that much anymore because I get very involved and I care deeply and it's so time intensive.
Right.
The other thing is that the kind of profession stand-up is, you've got to learn by doing it, and you learn from the failures Now, what happens with comedy also is comedians evolve over time. India is in a very nascent stage with regard to stand-up comedy. It's only been here, a decade and a half. Right? The other thing that happens is, in a smaller country, today what happens is you do a certain kind of comedy. Like you said, you don't like the sex stuff. Today the fact is, a young 22-year-old just gets a kick from the fact that he can use bad language on stage or talk about this graphic stuff. And people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. Right. Now, what happens in a smaller country with a smaller audience is that, okay, you do those jokes 5 or 10 times, people laugh, and then they're, okay, dude, we've heard that, now we want better. Your audience evolves.
Right.
Now that comedian has to raise his or her game to get up to still be able to please that audience, because this is no longer good enough for them. What happens in our country is, as this audience evolves, another audience comes and takes their place.
Wow.
So this comic doesn't feel the need to evolve because there is no external pressure. Now, sometimes there are audiences who will say, oh, stand-up comedy is vulgar, right? My question to you, Archana, why does a comedian crack a joke? Why?
To make people laugh.
Exactly. Now, my argument is that the audience is vulgar. The only reason that comedian keeps cracking those jokes is because the audience keeps laughing at it. If audiences stopped laughing at it, that comic's not going to crack that joke anymore. Right? So, my argument is the audience is vulgar. Yeah. If the quality of audience is improved...
Maybe we are respectful to the person who's standing and just trying to give him a cheer.
No, you're not respectful beyond a certain point. Right? So,
just asking.
It is the job of the audience to demand better. But the challenge is, because the audience doesn't demand better, or one audience changes and somebody else comes, there isn't that pressure for that artist to raise his or her game. I don't know if that explanation makes any sense.
It does, of course. And what you say also makes sense. And I know what you're saying about, that if you don't demand any better, how does the person... and it's acceptable.
But
then
also
it's acceptable.
It takes time, right? Nobody becomes that good that quick. The challenge today for young comics starting out is that the audience who comes to watch them at a live show is seeing Netflix and coming, right? The guys who you're seeing on your OTT platforms have been doing it for 20 years. They have honed their craft every day by performing. And then now you come to see a guy who's been doing it for 3 months. Come on.
Yeah.
So you're used to this and you're coming to watch this, expecting this to be this. Is never going to happen.
True. Yeah. Reflective.
Yeah. So it's about managing those expectations as well.
You work a lot with executive company, corporates and the head of the corporations.
Yeah.
How do you bring in humor and leadership together? Do you think it's important? Do you think it's not important? Do you think somebody needs to be
I think humor
in a spirit
is a superpower when it comes to coaching.
Wow.
Right? Because it lets people, with humor you can charm and disarm. Right? So that person is no longer CEO of that company. They are Indra or Rajiv or whoever the person might be. What you've got to do is get people comfortable enough to be honest, because that's when the real work begins. In fact, when I do a 2-day offsite with the leadership team, on the first day I focus on task related key company strategy, what is going on, what are the things we need to achieve, what are the key areas. The first night, then those 10 or 12 people watch a video of my show Naked, which is a deeply personal and intense thing. That sets the foundation for them to open up. So it's called Naked Leadership. The next day, when we start doing the personal work, that actually ends up being the harder day for people.
Of course.
And I've been with super senior guys on salaries of $3 million a year, that's 24 crores a year, who are in tears. In tears. I've had a group where somebody spoken about having cancer, about being bankrupt, about how her parents still, their death did not forgive her for being a girl child. Right? Suddenly at the end of that session, these people in this room are bound by their shared humanity. I mean, today the biggest challenge in organizations, there are 2 or 3 that they're facing. One is that people are incentivized vertically, but you want them to collaborate horizontally. That's not happening. The second thing is that the guys who should be thinking about the next decade, where this company is going, are so busy focused on the next quarter and their numbers, nobody is steering the ship. But this collaboration, to bring about that collaboration, when you get people to connect at a human level, now it's not the head of marketing who's, asking you for help. It's Gaurav who broke his leg and had to learn how to walk again. right? Or it's Priya who's been battling cancer for the last 2 years. You did not even know. You know, I've run this session and I've had people who have said that, you know what, I have worked with this person for the last 20 years. I know more about them today than I've learned in the last 20 years. So is humor a superpower when it comes to working in almost any profession? Yes, I strongly believe so.
And can humor be acquired?
Can
Or
humor
is
be
it
acquired?
something that
Of course.
is innate? Is
Of
it a
course.
skill that you can
It
learn?
is a skill, but it's also an attitude. You know, if
more
you
an attitude, yes.
Yeah, and just your joke doesn't have to be good, but just the fact that you've tried to crack one is enough to.
I'm also trying for the last, if you are observing, I'm trying to be.
Were you? Okay. That's why we get paid to do this. I'm kidding. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah. So how does one acquire it?
How does one acquire it?
How do I learn to be humorous?
You don't learn to be humorous. You just keep trying it, and over the course of time, you'll get better. You know.
Any joke books help, you think?
So actually, I've written an article which about 10 ways to be known for a good sense of humor.
Okay.
So if you just Google it, I'm writing on Medium or LinkedIn or whatever.
Okay.
So there's
I'll
a bunch
read.
of it. Yeah.
I'll read it then. Maybe next time when we meet for part 2, part 3.
Listen, we've been speaking for so long. Okay, this is going to be edited in like 18 parts.
It's a 1 hour
Who
long.
listens for so long anyway? Yeah? Now everyone's doing reels. Yeah, this will all have to be 90-second bits.
Yeah, and then the full one. You have such a fan following. I'll also get famous with, putting your whole YouTube. Okay. So this is great. I think I'm not going to wrap up. Make out what you can from whatever you heard papacj say.
Did you just ask your audience to make out? Guys, I did not know this was that kind of a podcast.
I just knew it. I said it and I knew it that he'll say something.
Oh, so that's the second act. Oh, okay.
So, but I have to wrap up with some rapid fire questions.
Go on.
What is that one thing that you always speak about when you're on stage? That one takya kalam, or like you're always like, okay, this is my favorite quote. Or this
Do
is
I
my
need to keep my language clean?
No.
Okay, so I started performing in London. My first 700 shows were there. I was the only Indian comedian. And I always wanted to project India in a very positive light. I've also performed in over 30 countries. I always try and represent India in a positive light. At the end of every show, I used to end by saying, don't mess with us Indians. Because we come from the land of the Kama Sutra. We can fuck you in more ways than you can count.
Ooh, that's super. That's a very powerful one. You heard it? Get it?
Yeah, I've had so many people repeat that line like all over the world. They're like, we're going to go and tell this to people in the office.
This is great. Okay, second is, what is naked for you?
Authenticity.
What is comedy for you?
Authenticity.
अरे नहीं कुछ और बताओ.
It is. I can't change the answer just because तुम्हें पसंद नहीं आया.
नहीं,
आपको पसंद नहीं आया.
रील बनाने के लिए.
नहीं.
Okay. What is failure for you?
What is failure? An opportunity.
Wow. Okay. What is second act for you? Now one word. And be kind this time. No debate.
I would have said authenticity, but you're just not going to buy it. Second act is, it's an inward journey, right?
Got it.
Yeah, it's an inward
That's
journey.
the answer I was looking for.
You know, it's that, there's that quote, right, where they say that you have only 2 lives and your second life begins when you realize you have only 1.
Yes.
So I think the second act is like
My
that.
husband just did an article on that and I chewed out that from there and I said, I'm going to write there are only 2 acts and your second act begins when you discover your first.
Yeah. Also, it's not an act. When you realize that
it's
it's
a
not an act.
metaphor. It is a metaphor. Next time, please use it like a metaphor.
Yeah,
like
but the other thing is that, what happens is we try and fit into different boxes, right? Those boxes need to fit into us, right? We go to a company and we get a job thinking, oh, I am working for IBM. No, IBM needs to work for you. You are the boss. You don't work for anybody. You don't work for an organization. They need to work for you.
Wow.
And if they stop working for you,
my
you're in the wrong place.
corporate fellow colleagues, did you hear what he said?
Yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that you want us to leave us mesmerized with.
Life में tension नहीं लेने का यार. It's short, enjoy the ride. Yeah. I love that saying, It says, don't let the world change your smile. Let your smile change the world.
Powerful. Super. एक जोक सुना के जाओगे?
नहीं, फ्री में नहीं देता मैं. प्रोफेशनल हो
एक हमारे
अरे इतने सुना दिए मैंने यार.
चलो next time के लिए. There should always be a next time to come back.
It's too much pressure when you ask me to give you a joke like that. I can do this. Are your audiences political?
No.
Well, anyway,
Yes.
tough. They'll have to learn. I was in Singapore, and I don't know if you've been to Singapore, but nothing ever happens in Singapore. So
Nothing ever happens, matlab?
Means I opened up the newspaper and picked it up. Front page of the paper, it says there was a pig on the street. If there is a pig on the street in Singapore, that becomes headline news. In Germany, it becomes a sausage. In America, it became the president of United States of America.
We are highly
So
non-political.
Well, I mean,
No,
American
but I
politics.
liked one more joke with, I just recently heard
Please.
on the Thai conference, where you said that this guy was speeding up, or was it you only? I don't know.
अरे ये तो बहुत लंबी कहानी है यार.
Is it
छोटा सा
कहानी?
joke नहीं है. हाँ.
Achha, that was cool. And one thing that also stuck with me in that conference, you said that every audience is not for you.
Yeah.
And I think that also stayed with me. And I must tell you that every time you're an influencer, you really leave people with a lot of food for thought. So I want to applaud you for that.
Oh, not at all. Thank you. That's very kind.
So thank you, papacj. You're
My pleasure.
amazing.
My
You
pleasure.
keep
You're
on
very
doing what
kind.
you're doing. You make people laugh and you make people cry. And you make people emote. So I think that is the best one can do, because what we need is more expression, more love, more warmth, more just opening our hearts to the world.
Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rachna.
Thank you.